If I ask you what do gunplay, melodrama, swordplay and ghost have in common? Well, that is the clue for today's segment. When we study the cinema of the world, how many of us know that there are film industries beside popular Bollywood films in South Asia? In fact, among the South Asian film industry, Hong Kong cinema industry is one of the most recent and upcoming one. In this session, our focus will be on films from Hong Kong, but let us begin with a little bit of history first. Hong Kong enjoys a long film history, almost as long as movies themselves, dating back to a visit by a camera crew from the Lumiere Studios in 1896. But it was almost after 13 years that Hong Kong had its first film production by Shanghai's Asia Film Studios film Stealing the Roast Duck, starring and directed by Liang Xiaobo. Hong Kong film industry is one of the most successful film industries in the world. For about 20 years, this city-state had one of the most robust industries, regularly surpassing almost all Western countries and second only to Hollywood in terms of film exports. During the 1930s and 40s, Shanghai film companies fled to British colony, but soon after the Mao's 1949 revolution, Hong Kong began churning out movies in tried and tested genres like comedies, crime movies, family dramas, sword fight films and Chinese operas. Films were made in both Mandarin and Cantonese. Maximum films came from large companies like Shaw Brothers, who ran their movie town, which was more like an old-fashioned Hollywood studio. In 1949, mainland Chinese cinema came under the control of the communists and became a state-financed propaganda arm that produced only socialist realist film targeted at the worker, peasant, soldier audience. Across the passage in Taiwan, where no film industry had existed before 1945, cinema slogged under the nationalist government's rigid control. Post-1949, Hong Kong cinema initially adopted the classical tradition and many of the generic conventions of Shanghai cinema and then gradually developed its own model. The history of Hong Kong cinema after the Second World War can be divided into three distinct periods. From 1946 to 1970, the so-called classical period. The majority of both Mandarin, the official Chinese language, and Cantonese, that is the local dialect films, were produced in studio. Although the films produced in Hong Kong in 1930s were overwhelmingly in Cantonese, the most significant phenomena in Hong Kong cinema after the Second World War was the large influx of film workers from Shanghai and the rise of a Mandarin film industry in Hong Kong. The majority of filmmakers who migrated to Hong Kong after 1946 were already established names in the Shanghai film industry. The largest of these was the Great Wall or Chang Cheng Company, which after its reorganization in 1950 joined together with two smaller left-wing sister companies, Fang Wang and Longma, under the guidance of Zhou Shilin and trained a new generation of filmmakers. Melodrama, which had memories of suffering in the war years, became the mainstream genre. However, all the films, even the comedies produced by these left-wing independent studios were didactic, preaching anti-feudalism, a quasi-feminist view on the sufferings of women, and even Marxist ideology of class struggle. The new style martial art films also had an important impact on Taiwanese cinema. In fact, the 1960s were Taiwan cinema's golden era as a large number of martial art films and romantic dramas adapted from popular writer Kwang Yeoh were successfully exported to the Hong Kong market, changing the direction of film trade from one-way to two-way. As a logical development of the new style martial art films, Kung Fu films dominated the local screens for almost the 1970s. The popularity of this genre signified a fundamental and lasting change in Hong Kong cinema. Action was valued over drama, and male stars replaced female stars as the main box office appeal. Martial art was introduced to the US audience in the early 70s through the films of Bruce Lee. American interest provided a tremendous boost to the industry. Distributors took advantage of the film's cost-effective production, and hundreds were imported into the United States between 1972 and 1975, and the industry began to thrive. In the wake of the 70s, Hong Kong filmmakers produced many gangster and sword play films replica of the Japanese samurai films. The dominance of the martial arts and kung fu films from the late 1960s to early 1970s can perhaps be explained by the fact that Hong Kong was entering the boom phase of out-and-out capitalist expansion and materialistic development. It was natural for the population to indulge in the quest for excitement and pleasure of the senses. Moreover, locally produced films proved more popular than Hollywood products and continued to have the largest share of almost 50 to 70% of the markets in 1990s. Following the death of Bruce Lee and the stock market crash of 1973 marked a recession in the local economy and a change in film taste, resulting in the decline of the kung fu films. Comic satires in Cantonese became another major trend besides the kung fu action film. Ironically, this did not signal a revival of the old Cantonese cinema. All films were produced by the existing system and dialogues with the Cantonese or Mandarin were dubbed in later. There no longer existed different distribution network or theatrical circuits for the two kinds of cinema, nor was there any difference in ticket price for Chinese and foreign films as in the previous decade. In other words, the dichotomy of Mandarin and Cantonese cinema after the Second World War almost disappeared, and there emerged a new breed of Hong Kong cinema which later blossomed in the 1980s. Although a typical production cost about as much as German or French or any other language film would, this industry did not enjoy any subsidy unlike its European contemporaries. Hong Kong movies were made simply because millions of people wanted to watch them. Also, unlike many film industries, Hong Kong has enjoyed little or no direct government support through either subsidies or import quotas. It is a thoroughly commercial cinema, highly corporate, concentrating on crowd-pleasing genres like comedy and action and relying heavily on formulas, sequels and remakes. Since the 1970s, Hong Kong cinema has been arguably the world's most energetic, imaginative popular cinema. Hong Kong cinema has been an industry for more than 60 years. It has always tried to offer something that the audience desired. Year in and year out, it produced dozens of fresh, lively and thrilling movies. Thus, it has retained much of its distinctive identity and continues to play a prominent part on the world cinema stage. In the West, Hong Kong's vigorous pop cinema, especially Hong Kong action cinema, has long had a strong cult following, which is now arguably a part of the cultural mainstream, widely available and imitated. I shall leave you with these images from a very popular Bruce Lee film. Hope you enjoy it and keep exploring newer dimensions of cinema.